feel like we need to give Amber a medal. That was pretty great. All of that, and I'm not even going to talk about the gospel reading today. I wanted to talk a little bit today about the reading from Ezekiel. This is a really strange book. If you've ever had a chance to flip through it, I was thinking, what are some pop culture references that I've connected to Ezekiel? And it's that, when I'm traveling somewhere and I'm in a hotel and there's a TV and it's on and invariably some show about ancient aliens comes on the TV, the book of Ezekiel always comes up. So there's something about the book of Ezekiel that people who are really into aliens really gravitate to. So that should tell you a little bit about how weird it is. It's a really, really weird book. Ezekiel was a priest, and he was a priest during the time of the Babylonian exile, which was like 500-600 BCE, when Babylon conquered the southern kingdom of Judah. And Ezekiel was among the first group of people who were deported from his homeland. Now, it's a book full of, like I said, very, very striking language. Ezekiel, by today's standards, might be called a performance artist. He did a lot of kind of demonstrations in the street, some of which, especially to our modern ears, are very strange, but were very strange at the time, too. And, of course, that wasn't our reading today, so hopefully I'm just piquing your curiosity about Ezekiel, and you'll go read it. But he was very concerned throughout the entire book with the Judeans worshiping idols. Idols meaning gods of other peoples, other lands, maybe particularly the idol Molech. Now, when we think about this from our modern perspective, being solid people who want to be politically correct because we want to be compassionate and because we don't believe that people who practice other religions are somehow, going to be punished for that. We want to be very compassionate and concerned about that. So when we hear these stories about a priest, being very upset with his people practicing other religions, we tend to think, oh, well, that's so, that's so backwards, or that is so incorrect, or it's and we just have to own, I think, that is our modern way of looking at that. But at the time, I want to color this in a little bit for you. At the time, it was a little different. Because something else that Ezekiel talks about several times within the book is he talks about the issue of sacrificing children to these other gods. And that was a very common practice in this time and place throughout the Middle East and really throughout the world. We have archaeological proof that it happened here in North America, it happened in South America, it definitely happened in Africa. So this was something that actually set apart the Jewish people from their neighbors, was that there was no ritual prostitution. There was no ritual human sacrifice, for the most part. And when it did happen, we have books like Ezekiel coming out of that, where someone is teaching, this is not right, this is not something we should be doing. So it's not just kind of abstract theology. It's not just kind of being religiously intolerant, but it's actually addressing practices that were violent and grotesque and that were done in the name of various deities, done in the name of religion. And just as a quick side note, this actually does still happen today. I had a student at the seminary where I teach who graduated 2 years ago, who was from Ghana. And when he first came to the seminary, some of the professors weren't quite sure what to do with him, because he would talk about the religions of his home country in a very, he would describe them as being satanic. And so we thought, okay, we have to this isn't going to fly in the Episcopal Church in America, you don't call other religions satanic. And, he was very understanding about that. But then about 1.5 years into his degree, he wrote about a story in my class, actually, where he described how when he was a child, he was actually marked to be sacrificed. and he escaped with the help of various people. And at that point, it was like, okay, well, I can understand why you would want to call the religions of your home country satanic. If you were in that particular position, absolutely. So it does still happen today. And what we've pieced together archaeologically, indulge me for a minute. I know this is a little heady. But we've pieced together that this kind of sacrifice happened a lot more during times of societal stress and anxiety. So where a particular society maybe would sacrifice animals for, and that was very, very normal, and of course included the Hebrew people. When things started to get really bad, then maybe there would be some human sacrifice. And then when it got really, really bad, then there would be child sacrifice. And the thinking goes that children were both the most vulnerable and also the most valuable in society. So when there was a sense that there was a deity that was really angry, when things were really bad, to offer the most valuable thing you could would be the way to fix things, being children. Now, if you're horrified, that's a good sign. This is very horrifying. And maybe we can remember that as we think about this book of Ezekiel. But if we're honest, this is actually not just some practice that primitive tribal people did. Children and vulnerable people today are continually sacrificed, even in this advanced nation. Though it looks a little different. It looks like slashing budgets for public schools, while wars of choice overseas are funded without question. It looks like systems of medical care that make it more difficult to access quality care if you are poor, being the norm. It looks like children bearing the burden of gun violence drills as a normal part of their education. And environmental decisions that ensure that some people grow up with less clean air and less safe drinking water. These are the ways that we practice human sacrifice, and I could go on. And have you noticed the same dynamics in modern societies? In a time of national anxiety, what budget lines get cut? It's never the defense budget. Who is told they need to start pinching pennies when things are rough? It's never the people with money and power. We don't sacrifice to Molech. We sacrifice to the idols of security, profit, and control. Now, what does all of this have to do with our particular reading from Ezekiel? Well, this reading is probably the most well-known and probably the least weird reading in the book of Ezekiel. It's a vision he has of a valley of dry bones, which God breathes new life into, and then the bones, they start to animate. They start to dance even. They grow life, and they live. Well, the connection between all of this that I've been telling you, I don't have any proof of this, but I want to suggest, where would you be most likely to find a valley of dry bones? Is it possible that this vision is taking place among the bones of those who have been sacrificed by a society gripped by fear? If so, it makes it mean a little bit more, right? That these aren't just random bones, and I mean, that'd be pretty cool anyway, random bones coming to life, but what if these are the bones of people who had been told that they had to give up their lives in order that the community could make peace with an angry God, in order that the community could once again find harmony? What if these are the bones of people who were told, you are the problem here, and God is breathing new life into them? There's a word for this, of course, this sacrificing of people, making a certain group of people the problem. It's called scapegoating. And it's something that as we get closer to Holy Week, which is coming up, something that becomes much more central in the Christian narrative. I mean, some theologians would actually argue that the entire story of Jesus is a story of God unmasking the scapegoating system in human cultures, showing it for what it is, that it actually is not functional. It actually doesn't do anything. It's just a cycle of violence. And showing that what we have called necessary sacrifice is, in fact, a failure of love that is not holy. Nor does it actually bring peace. It only brings the illusion of peace by placing the weight of a community's fear and disorder onto the shoulders of someone else. We still use a lot of language about sacrifice in our worship service. Maybe you've noticed that, particularly during the Eucharistic prayer. We talk about a sacrifice of praise and thanksgiving. Every week I say that up there, praise and thanksgiving, or our lives as a living sacrifice. Or in other forms of the Eucharistic prayer, which I actually have not used here in a while, there is a phrase, Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us, and the people reply, therefore let us keep the feast. I don't love language around sacrifice, to be honest, because it's so easy to misunderstand. And because churches have a long history of mimicking the rest of human culture by asking people with the least amount of power to sacrifice the most. Or worse, a history of sacrificing the well-being of the marginalized so that the majority can remain comfortable and aloof. But at its root, the word sacrifice simply means to make sacred. They share that common etymological root, the S-A-C, sacrifice, sacred. And some theologians would say that with the death and resurrection of Jesus, God was issuing a final judgment call on all sacrifices that involved violence. We also see this in the Hebrew Bible over and over again, by the way. This injunction that sacrifices no longer need to be made if they're violent, not even animal sacrifices. And that everything is sacred. So we do not need to sacrifice. So don't set anything apart to be offered to God. It is all God's. It is all sacred. Some theologians would say that is one of the ways God tries to interrupt the scapegoat mechanism. So when we gather for the Eucharist, as we do every Sunday, our sharing of a common meal. Now I know with those little wafers, it can be hard to make the connection that this is actually supposed to be a meal because we don't eat that kind of food anywhere else. But really, when we celebrate Eucharist together, we are practicing a common meal. And the idea is that that is what takes the place of the violent sacrificial system. What used to involve blood and gore and horror has been transformed into a simple meal with songs and prayers and remembering the story of how this entire creation is made by God, and it is good. And to remember your gratitude is sacred. Your love is sacred. And perhaps most profoundly, human community, every single person in the community is sacred. Did you notice, by the way, that Ezekiel isn't seeing just one single skeleton be put together, but it's actually a whole multitude of people being raised from the valley of dry bones? Over and over again, we see this in the biblical texts. resurrection is never just about one individual. Resurrection is a communal process with communal effects. But the truth is, resurrection is not just some beautiful pie-in-the-sky daydream. Resurrection is disruptive. Because if every person is sacred, then the systems we rely on that treat certain people as expendable cannot remain untouched. And this is why what we do here on Sunday morning really matters. We come to the table not to reenact a violent sacrifice, but to participate in a different kind of world, a world in which no one is placed on the altar. Everyone is fed, and in which what is broken is not discarded, but is gathered, blessed, and shared. Every time we come to the Eucharistic table, we are practicing seeing one another and the bread we share and the wine we drink and the songs we sing and the concerns that we share about our lives as sacred and worthy of embracing, not casting out. We are practicing a way of being together that refuses the logic of fear and scarcity and blame. And over time, over all the Sundays, with all the hymns and the coffee hours and all those boring sermons and strange readings, the dry bones of our own lives begin to animate. And we start to see where, maybe without even realizing it, we have accepted the logic of the violent sacrifice, where we have made peace with systems that ask someone else to carry the cost, and where we have told ourselves that this is just how things are. Maybe more uncomfortably, maybe we also come to realize where we have believed about ourselves or about someone else, you are the problem here. Because resurrection does not just happen out there. It happens wherever that lie is broken. Wherever someone who has been cast aside is seen again as sacred and worthy of love. Wherever we refuse, even in small ways, to participate in the lie of sacred violence, that is where we find resurrection. Amen.